Good evening. On behalf of the Board of Directors of the Jesse Helms Center, welcome to this celebration, the 20th anniversary of the founding of the Jesse Helms Center. Although Senator Helms cannot be with us tonight, we are honored to have Mrs. Helms with us. Mrs. Helms, would you please stand and be recognized? In addition to Mrs. Helms, we have a strong representation from the Helms family. Would all the members of the Helms family please stand and be recognized as well, please? Leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance is law school student and grandson of Senator and Mrs. Helms, Mike Stewart. Please rise for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mike. Our invocation tonight will be delivered by the man who, upon Justice Scalia's elevation to the Supreme Court, filled his vacancy on the District of Columbia Court of Appeals. Please welcome Charlotte's own Judge David Sintel.
Please pray with me. O Lord, we come before you with humble thanks for the blessings you have bestowed upon us. We thank you, O Lord, for having blessed us with a bounteous and goodly land and having raised up wise leaders to guide us through the ages. We thank you, O Lord, for the example of thy servant Jesse Helms and thy servant Bud Nance. And we thank you especially tonight, O Lord, for the blessings of wisdom and counsel bestowed upon thy servant Antonin Scalia, whom we honor tonight. And we ask your continued blessings upon him and upon the leaders of this nation and the world. We thank you, O Lord, for the freedoms with which you have endowed thy people. And we pray, O Lord, that all mankind may be blessed with the enjoyment of life and of liberty and of the pursuit of happiness. We thank you, O Lord, for the fruit of this rich land, and especially for the nourishment of which we partake tonight. Bless, O Lord, our nourished bodies, and use us in thy service. We come in the name of the Lord. Amen.
Thank you, Judge Sintel. In the early 1980s, I was privileged to get my start in politics as an advance man for Senator Helms. These trips often focused on working with friends who had agreed to host special events honoring the senator. And in this capacity, I had the privilege of getting to know some very remarkable people. These individuals were bold risk-takers whose entrepreneurial vision had produced the means to assist in our efforts. As I got to know the individuals better, I became fascinated by their stories. My background in education led me to wish for the opportunity to tell the stories and teach young people about the opportunities available to them in what Senator Helms calls the miracle of America, our free enterprise system. That opportunity came in 1994 when I was named to my current position as president of the Helms Center. Senator Helms told me he did not want a dusty museum. He wanted an organization that makes a difference in the lives of young people. From this vision came our innovative experiential training program, the Free Enterprise Leadership Challenge, which has hosted over 5,000 young people since its inception in 1995. FELC, as we like to call it, is a 3 to 5 day ethical entrepreneurial training program where young people learn by doing. They write business plans, borrow money from the bank, produce and market products or services, conduct a virtual trade mission, and pay taxes. They learn about principled leadership and begin to identify the values that are important to them in their lives. This intense experience has been known to change lives in many different and exciting ways.
Our dealings with other nations was derided by supposed sophisticates as unrealistic. But then Ronald Reagan took these words to heart and made them the center of his foreign
This month we are celebrating the 20th anniversary of Senator Helms giving his papers to Wingate University, which gave birth to the Jesse Helms Center.
President Reagan challenged
It's entirely appropriate that upon this auspicious occasion, we choose to honor those heroes of free enterprise upon which our country was built. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the Jesse Helms Center and the Charles A. Cannon Free Enterprise Hall of Fame.
From 1973 to 2003, Jesse Helms served his country and state as a United States Senator. Over his long and distinguished career, Senator Helms amassed a collection of papers that reflect his personal vision as well as his international impact. Many important institutions approached the senator, asking that the historically important collection be housed on their campuses. But Senator Helms had something else in mind. In 1987, during a visit to the senator's Washington office, Helms offered his papers to Dr. Paul Kortz, president of what is now Wingate University. The senator remembered the small school that had accepted him when times were tough. During the Depression, when he couldn't afford the tuition, Wingate College opened its doors to the promising young student, something he never forgot. The decision of where the Helms papers would go was made. Soon, friends of Helms and Wingate began dreaming of a permanent building for the archives, a special place that would not only preserve and exhibit the senator's collection, but also honor the man. At first, Helms rejected the idea as a dusty museum. But his wife Dot intervened, imagining the building as something much more than a museum.
The main thing that we want people to understand is that this is not a monument to Jesse Helms. It was not started as that. It will not continue as that. It's just the fact that the principles and the values he stands for are the principles and values that made this country great.
Thus, the Jesse Helms Center Foundation was born. Its mission, to help preserve and promote the values upon which our nation was founded, an institution for learning and inspiration. In the spring of 1999, outside the first Jesse Helms Center headquarters in a restored historical home in Wingate, a distinguished gathering witnessed the groundbreaking for the new A.J. Fletcher Free Enterprise Center and Charles A. Cannon Free Enterprise Hall of Fame. On April 28, 2001, the new 23,000 square foot Jesse Helms Center facility was formally dedicated by the Honorable Margaret Thatcher. The world's largest cast bronze eagle, a gift from Ike Belk, whose father William Henry Belk is honored inside, adorns the plaza adjacent to the public entrance to the center. Visitors may browse exhibits that chronicle Helms' work with the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, the UN, and his meetings with many of history's most important figures. An exact replica of the senator's office harkens back to Helms' busy days on Capitol Hill. The center's archives is a state-of-the-art facility with over 10,000 linear feet of storage space. Constructed of 12-inch thick concrete walls, the stack area features a special fire suppression system, heat and humidity controls, and a special security system with a vault and surveillance cameras. Figures from the national and international political arenas are brought to Wingate for the Jesse Helms Center Lecture Series. One of the principles dear to Senator Helms is the system of free enterprise, the cornerstone of values upon which our nation has built its strength. The Free Enterprise Leadership Challenge offers students an understanding of business, personal responsibility, and the opportunities available to them in the free enterprise system. During Challenge Week, students interact with prominent community and business leaders who share success stories and answer questions about their careers. Over 5,000 students have taken the challenge. In an age where athletes and entertainers have become cultural role models for America's youth, the Free Enterprise Leadership Challenge focuses the spotlight on the entrepreneur, on hard work, and creating meaningful success through the free enterprise system. The Charles A. Cannon Free Enterprise Hall of Fame showcases the importance of the entrepreneurship, innovation, and determination that drive the economy. The Hall of Fame pays tribute to Americans who overcame their humble roots to become successful businessmen and philanthropists. Their stories are told in bronze and in light and sound. Among the champions of free enterprise is A.J. Fletcher, born in the rugged North Carolina hills. He built Raleigh's first television station, WRAL, hired Jesse Helms, and later helped him get elected to the Senate. Charles Cannon, founder of Cannon Mills, was at one time the top-selling producer of sheets and towels in the world. His caretaking of his millwork family was legendary. Known as the Merchant of the South, William Henry Belk opened a tiny store in Monroe that grew into the largest privately held department store organization in the country. R.J. Reynolds had trouble reading and speaking, but he had vision. By locating his tobacco products factory near the railroad, he shipped more goods than anyone. He made millions and gave away millions. Tonight, we celebrate the newest inductees into the Cannon Free Enterprise Hall of Fame. John Pope took his father's small 5 and 10 cent stores and added discount variety chains such as Super Dollar, Roses, and Maxway to become a retail powerhouse that spanned an area from Texas to North Carolina. His variety wholesalers' empire totaled as many as 330 stores. Pope watched over the gross profit margins like a hawk. He located his stores in small towns where there was little competition, and they thrived even during years of recession. Pope's financial success made possible the establishment of the John William Pope Foundation, which funds numerous charities, universities, and free market-oriented organizations throughout the United States. He was a founding sponsor of the John Locke Foundation, a staunch conservative Republican and philanthropist. A.E. Finley once said, "I spent 9 years railroading and 41 years equipment peddling." He also spent a lifetime doing good works. In 1929, at the start of the Great Depression, he capitalized on his sales know-how and formed his first heavy equipment business in Raleigh, North Carolina. From Virginia to Florida, heavy equipment sold by Finley could be seen scraping and grading the roads, farming the land, building America. A.E. Finley & Associates became the largest heavy construction equipment business in the nation. By the time he retired in 1965, Finley's heavy equipment empire also included motels, restaurants, concrete pipe and block manufacturers, dry cleaning plants, citrus groves, even a cattle farm, which he later sold to North Carolina State College. He was a generous giver, supporting colleges and universities, hospitals and churches, and countless other worthy religious, literary, scientific, and educational organizations still receive funds from the A.E. Finley Foundation. A strong believer in the free enterprise system, A.E. Finley also believed in a strong constitution and federalism. He founded Citizens for the Preservation of Constitutional Government to promote a small central government and economic freedom for all. Heir to his grandfather's small textile company, Roger Milliken parlayed the business into the largest privately held textile firm in the world, Milliken & Company. A staunch advocate of education, Milliken created a learning center within the corporate campus, Milliken University. The school, which features 15 classrooms, strives to help the men and women in its workforce reach their fullest potential while ensuring company growth. Milliken's name is associated with the American Quality Movement. His own pursuit of quality brought many accolades, including the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award. Mr. Milliken is also renowned for his conservation and tree planting, having been recognized nationally by the National Arbor Day Foundation. From humble beginnings in Depression-era Holdenville, Oklahoma, T. Boone Pickens grew up to be one of the nation's most successful businessmen. The legendary oil and gas executive built the nation's largest independent oil company, Mesa Petroleum, and later reinvented himself in his 70s as one of the world's most successful investment fund operators. During the span of his career, Pickens made hundreds of millions of dollars for others as well as himself. The breadth of his philanthropy, nearly $500 million so far, includes medical research, emergency relief, and educational and academic projects. Wrangler jeans were known for their toughness, but the man who made the durable denims, E.A. Morris, was a quiet, unassuming defender of American principles. As CEO of Bluebell Incorporated, Morris worked closely with the Rodeo Cowboys Association, who tested his Wrangler jeans in competitions. He developed innovative systems that increased apparel production, championed employee benefits, and made the company the world's largest producer of work and play clothes. Morris was not only a shrewd entrepreneur, he was also a generous giver. The Edwin A. Morris Charitable Foundation is the single largest donor to the Duke Comprehensive Cancer Center, donating more than $5 million. The Morris Center for Urologic Research at Duke University funds innovative research projects aimed at finding a cure for prostate cancer. Named in honor of Morris, one of the founding fathers of the North Carolina conservative movement, the E.A. Morris Fellowship for Emerging Leaders encourages committed, diverse, and principled North Carolinians to pursue greater leadership roles within their professions and communities. It is with great pride and admiration that the Jesse Helms Center Foundation welcomes its newest inductees into the Charles A. Cannon Free Enterprise Hall of Fame.
I've been richly blessed to personally know 4 of our 5 inductees, and 3 of them are represented tonight by family or friends. All of our inductees are very successful. However, as Senator Helms' old friend and my old football coach Lou Holtz describes it, success is when someone makes a lot of money. But when someone helps others be successful, that is true significance. Ladies and gentlemen, I assure you that all of our inductees live lives of great significance. Mr. John Pope was a dynamic businessman of the First Order who knew how to ask tough questions, always cutting right through to the heart of a matter. I know because he asked me some tough questions over the years. However, John Pope did not just ask tough questions, he usually provided the answers. And our state and nation is much better off because of this. Representing the Pope family tonight is his bride of 57 years, Mrs. Joy Pope, accompanied by her son, Mr. Art Pope. Please recognize them. Ed Morris was a man of few words, but visionary action. Not only did he put the Wrangler in blue jeans, he was a founding father of the North Carolina conservative movement. Accepting this recognition tonight is the president of the E.A. Morris Foundation, Mr. John Thomas. Although I never had the privilege of meeting A.E. Finley, maybe that's my excuse, Bobby. I feel like I know him because he has left his mark on so many important institutions, from hospitals and churches to universities. However, just as importantly, Mr. Finley was an early and strong public proponent of the free enterprise system. Accepting the recognition tonight is Mr. Bobby Brown, president of the A.E. Finley Foundation. If you are unable to visit the Helms Center to see the Free Enterprise Hall of Fame for yourself, I'm pleased to announce that we will soon be taking it to the World Wide Web through our new website, www.freeenterpriseheroes.com, which should be available by the end of the year. As we begin our dinner, I direct your attention once again to the video screen, where we will offer a preview of an exciting new film, The Call of the Entrepreneur. We're currently premiering this in cities and college campuses across North Carolina. This film is scheduled to be broadcast on PBS early next year and provides an inspirational description of how the free enterprise system works. We are utilizing it in our FELC program, as well as developing a special curriculum that can be mass marketed to schools across the country. It premieres in Raleigh at the North Carolina Museum of History on November 13th. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy your meal.
An entrepreneur is the creative force in economics. The entrepreneur is the person who comes and looks at a desert or a jungle or a wilderness and sees a garden, sees an opportunity to create new value.
What entrepreneurs really do is put what they earn at risk, where they could lose it all, and do it over and over and over again.
I learned risk without knowing that it's a risk. Taking risk is actually dashing into hope. You're just dashing into the future and hoping that it's going to be better.
You could really think of the first farmers as the first entrepreneurs. Farms would make cities possible, and that those cities would make civilizations possible. And it was those civilizations that made things like worldwide commerce, and science, and music, and philosophy possible.
Our county extension agent, first year was in business. He come here and he looked me right square in the eye and he says, "You're broke. Get out." And I looked right back at him and I says, "What have we got to do to get this right?" You put your butt in the corner, you'd be surprised what you can achieve.
Without the entrepreneur, economies are barren, they're dead.
A zero-sum game is like poker. We all sit down at a table, and I only win if someone else loses. That's not the way a market works. That's not the way the wealth of New York City has been built. All the stuff behind me was created by energy applied to physical matter that transformed it.
That's the genius of entrepreneurship. It's the discovery process. It's the courage that's involved in it. The investment, the intelligence, the openness, the other-directedness. Sometimes they're the most common resources that we walk over, that we ignore, that we even are perhaps repulsed by, that become the source of wealth, the source of jobs, the source of prosperity. I mean, this is an incredible institution.
Senator Helms is fond of reminding me that if you ever see a turtle sitting on a fence post, it is a good bet that it did not get there by itself. The heart of any effective nonprofit organization is its volunteers. In the case of the Helms Center, most importantly, our volunteer board of directors. Tonight, I want to thank all our volunteers, but especially the members of our board of directors who are listed in your program. Would those members of our board who are still with us tonight please stand? Please give them a round of applause. Amen. I also want to take this opportunity to recognize a long-time serving member of our board whose counsel we value greatly. Unfortunately, he recently had to step down to handle duties of the family business, but we do want to recognize his 9 years of service to the Helms Center. I ask that Art Pope please accept this token of our appreciation. Art. Under our Constitution, one of the most important roles that a United States Senator plays is in the appointment process for positions in the federal judiciary. Senator Helms served 30 years in the Senate, so naturally he played a role in the appointment of many federal judges at all levels. In fact, we have many of those appointees with us tonight, and we thank you for your public service. To pay tribute to our special guest tonight, we have one of those appointees. Judge Mack Howard was appointed to the Eastern District Court in 1987 by President Reagan after many years of distinguished service as a federal prosecutor and deputy White House counsel. A graduate of Wake Forest Law School and West Point, Judge Howard served 10 years in the Army, which included 2 tours of duty in Vietnam. Judge Howard was able to put his military experience to good use in 2005 when he was appointed to the Foreign Intelligence Service Surveillance Court by Supreme Court Chief Justice William Rehnquist. Please join me in welcoming Judge Mack Howard. Mack Howard, thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Mack Howard. I'm an old country lawyer. For 20 years now, since Senator Ms. Helms asked Ronald Reagan to appoint me to the bench, I've been on the federal bench in the last couple of years, including this past week. I serve as a judge on America's Secret Court. I want to begin by acknowledging our special thanks for Her Eminence, Mrs. Helms, being here tonight. Isn't she beautiful? Honored guests, fellow judges, Professor Robbie Everett, Mary Potter, Suma, Jimmy Broughton, Jimmy, ladies and gentlemen. Earlier tonight, you received the invocation to this body by the Honorable David Centel, Judge on the United States Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia, originally from North Carolina. He's been in Washington now over 20 years. I don't even know if he knows how to speak North Carolinian again. He sits on what is generally recognized as America's second most significant court. Dave Centel from Charlotte, Asheville. How do you get on such a court? I want to tell you just a quick story of how I think it happened. I believe it to be true. In the fall of 1986, Justice Antonin Scalia was confirmed to the United States Supreme Court. He left a seat at the D.C. Circuit. Justice Scalia. There came a time a couple of months later when Ms. Helms, Uncle Jesse was in his office as a senior senator from North Carolina. His good friend, the senior senator from South Carolina, was then the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Senator Strom Thurmond ambled down to Senator Helms' office, was admitted. Jesse, you got any Italian judges down there in North Carolina? We can get us a seat on that D.C. circuit. Senator Helms very properly thought a moment. Well, Strom, I got this boy Dave Centel over at Asheville. He's been a district judge for about a couple of years. Dad burn, Jesse, that's perfect. He's an Italian. Let's put him on the D.C. circuit to take the Scalia seat. History would repeat. 4, 5, 6 months later, Judge David Centel has left North Carolina. He now is a resident of the District of Columbia and a famous judge on the D.C. circuit where he's done very well. I believe that story to be true. I don't know, but I've heard it, and I've told it both in their presence. Centel shaking his head no. Justice Scalia doesn't know. We'll leave it at that. Ms. Helms, did the story sound real to you? That's all I needed. Yes, ma'am. My instructions are to introduce the 2007 recipient of the Admiral James Nance Freedom Award. After I've made this introduction, John Dodd will come back and he will explain to you the basis of this award, and then we will hear from the recipient for 2007. Our special guest tonight and the 2007 Nance Medal recipient is United States Supreme Court Associate Justice Antonin Scalia. Justice Scalia has served on the Supreme Court for more than 20 years. And as a federal judge, because he had the seat I just talked about, for more than 25. Justice Scalia was born in New Jersey. He grew up in the Queens of New York area and was an only child. His father, Eugene, was a college professor who emigrated from Sicily as a teenager and who would ultimately earn a PhD from Columbia University. His mother, Catherine, was the daughter of Italian immigrants who Miss Catherine was an elementary school teacher. Papa Scalia taught his son that neither education nor intellect was the most important thing in life. He taught that brains, like muscles, can be hired by the hour. But the senior Scalia impressed upon his son from his early days and attempted to teach that the only thing not for sale ever is character. Justice Scalia married Maureen McCarthy, a Radcliffe English major and an Irish immigrant doctor's daughter he met while he was at Harvard. They've been married 47 years, and they have 9 children. Got to see my notes. 4 girls and 5 boys. The daughters are married professionals or married to professionals. 2 of his sons are lawyers. One is a Catholic priest, whom it is reported that Justice Scalia has said, 1 priest is worth 2 lawyers. Another son is a college professor, and 1 son is a fellow West Point graduate, presently a major in the U.S. Army stationed at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, and who has served in Iraq. Justice Scalia and Miss Maureen have, I don't have that many fingers, 28 grandchildren. That deserves a hand. Justice Scalia attended a Jesuit-administered military high school in Manhattan in his youth, which in addition to the strenuous academic pursuit there, he was a member of the rifle team. He even rode the subway from Queens to Manhattan carrying a .22 rifle. Can you imagine what would happen in modern day if Associate Justice Antonin Scalia attempted to enter a subway in New York carrying a rifle? He graduated from Georgetown undergraduate, Harvard Law School. At Georgetown, he was, of course, first in his class. And at graduation, he delivered the valedictorian speech, and it contained hints of his life to come. He said, "Our days were spent in hunting, but our prey was more elusive than forest deer or mountain bear or prairie buffalo. For we are seekers of the truth. Truth has no bones, no flesh, no solid earthly form. You cannot hear her creeping through the forest. You cannot see her running through the forest paths by day. You cannot watch your arrow speeding straight to her heart. For those who seek her, she is everywhere. For those who do not love her, she is nowhere." And then the graduating senior, 50 years ago, said, "If we allow the cares of wealth or fame or specialized career to stifle our spirit of wonder, to turn us from the hunt, to kill in us what is most human, then we shall have betrayed ourselves, our society, and our human race." During the 47 years since graduating law school, he's held a plethora of private, academic, and governmental positions. He's a man of many talents. He sings. He plays the piano, and he's personally appeared in opera. He's a passionate student of Tom Jefferson and Joe DiMaggio. He's an outdoorsman, and he's killed at least one of those, each of the 4 kind of wild turkeys in North America, including one in Wilkes County, North Carolina, that I saw him shoot. He will explain tonight how he interprets the United States Constitution. And perhaps in that explanation, he will explain to you, my fellow North Carolinians, how he came to support bearded hippies, protesters' right to burn our American flag. By the way, it's reported the morning after the announcement of Justice Scalia's decision regarding the flag. This occurred in 1989. He came down in his home to breakfast where his beloved and conservative Maureen was scrambling his eggs. And upon her hearing the justice enter her kitchen, she started, "It's a grand old flag, it's a grand old flag." In North Carolina, we got an expression, Mr. Justice, "There ain't nobody happy unless mama's happy." Ladies and gentlemen, constitutional scholar, poker player, and father of 9, Justice Scalia is a living proof that the law does not have to be dull, and that sometimes it takes a boy from Queens to remind us what it means to be a great American.
Direct your attention to the video screen briefly.
Admiral James Wilson Nance dedicated his career to serving the nation he loved. Born in Monroe, North Carolina, Bud Nance grew up just 2 blocks from his lifelong friend Jesse Helms. After high school, he attended North Carolina State College and went on to graduate from the Naval Academy in 1944. Nance was assigned to the battleship USS North Carolina, where he served for the remainder of World War II. After the war, he trained to be a pilot and became a flight instructor at the Pensacola Naval Air Station. In the mid-1950s, he was assigned to exchange duty with the British Royal Navy and later became a Naval Air Test Center project pilot, test landing planes on carriers. He flew missions in both the Korean conflict and the Vietnam War. Before his military retirement in 1979, Admiral Nance served as the senior naval officer on the staff of the commander of U.S. forces in Europe. He also held strategic and planning posts in the Pentagon, and Nance was commander of several ships, including the USS Forrestal, an aircraft carrier with a crew of 5,000. His numerous Navy decorations include 2 Distinguished Service Medals and the Legion of Merit. Admiral Nance received a master's degree in international relations from George Washington University, and in 1981, he joined President Reagan's White House staff as Deputy Assistant for National Security Affairs. He retired from public service and went to work for Boeing, where he was manager of Navy systems. Senator Helms coaxed his old friend out of retirement to assume the duties of staff director of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Nance agreed to return to public service provided he could work without pay. Since Senate rules prohibit the practice, the admiral was given an annual salary of $153. As the senator would later quip, Bud's worth every penny. In 2003, the Jesse Helms Center began its tradition of awarding the Medal of Freedom in honor of Admiral Nance to distinguished public servants who share his traditional American values and beliefs. Ladies and gentlemen, the Board of Directors of the Jesse Helms Center is honored to present the James W. Nance Medal of Freedom to Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, the Honorable Antonin G. Scalia.
On behalf of the Board of Directors of Jesse Helms Center, it is my pleasure to present to Justice Antonin Scalia the 2008 James W. Nance Medal of Freedom for your distinguished public service in support of the preservation of liberty and the promotion of the foundational principles of our nation.
Thank you very much, President Dodd. And thank you, Mac, for a warm introduction. I don't need that speech. I'm going to wing it. Mrs. Helms, fellow judges, ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to be here at the Helms Center and to be the recipient of the Nance Award. In thinking what I would talk to you about tonight, I was going to give a prepared text that I have over there, but I don't feel like it. And so I'm going to talk about what I often talk about. It's almost, if I were a politician, it would be my stump speech. What I care most about, and the single thing that I would most hope to be able to change in the law, and that is the manner of interpreting the Constitution of the United States. I am one of a small but hearty group of judges and academics, even smaller among academics, who are known as originalists. An originalist is somebody who adheres to the text of the Constitution, but more importantly, gives that text the meaning that it had when the American people adopted it. It is such a minority view currently that people sometimes come up to me and say, Justice Scalia, when did you first become an originalist? It's some kind of weird affliction, like, when did you first start eating human flesh? Originalism used to be orthodoxy. Nobody ever thought the Constitution morphed. I mean, if you had told Joseph's story that what it means is going to change from decade to decade on the basis of whatever 5 out of 9 justices on the Supreme Court think it ought to mean, he would have been uncomprehending. Originalism was orthodoxy. Until about the Warren Court, nobody would have thought of saying such a thing. Not that judges in the past did not distort the Constitution. Of course they did. You will have willful judges with you until the end of time. But the difference was that in the old days, they did it the good, honest, old-fashioned way. They lied about it. They said that the Constitution meant thus and so when it never meant thus and so. The change is that you don't have to say that anymore. You can say, oh yes, the Constitution didn't used to prohibit hanging, for example, or it didn't, or worse still, it didn't used to prohibit the death penalty. Of course it didn't, inasmuch as the death penalty was the only penalty for a felony in 1791 when the Eighth Amendment was adopted. It was the definition of a felony. A felony was a crime punishable by death. So of course but nowadays, it is unconstitutional. I mean, that's extraordinary. That's the change there's been. You don't have to lie about it. And if you believe, as I do, that hypocrisy is the beginning of virtue, that is a very bad change. You should have to lie about it. The terminology that best represents the new orthodoxy of an evolving Constitution is the abominable phrase, the living Constitution. I have grammar school students who come to the court now and then, and they recite very proudly what they've been taught to say. The Constitution is a living document. We originalists want to persuade you that the Constitution is a dead document. Now, I can do better than that. That's packaging. It's an enduring document. It is an unchanging document. The line of opinions of ours that most clearly expresses the living Constitution notion is our opinions dealing with the Eighth Amendment, the Cruel and Unusual Punishments Clause. And those opinions say explicitly that what constitutes cruel and unusual punishment is not static, but it changes from time to time to comport with, and this is a verbatim quote, to comport with, quote, the evolving standards of decency that mark the progress of a maturing society. Isn't that beautiful? Let me say, the evolving standards of decency that mark the progress of a maturing society. Every day in every way we get better and better. Societies only mature, they never rot. Now, that was not the Pollyannish frame of mind that was possessed by the framers of the Bill of Rights and of the Eighth Amendment. The reason they framed it was that they feared that a future generation would not be as wise as they were, or would not be as virtuous as they were. Not that every day in every way, the evolving standards of decency that mark the progress of a maturing society. I mean, that's not what a Bill of Rights assumed. It assumed that the future could be worse, just as it could be better. And the purpose of the Bill of Rights was to set a floor below which the future generation could not go. Nonetheless, that's what our opinions say. The argument usually made, or most frequently made, in support of the living Constitution is, it's often put in an anthropomorphic way. That is, it goes something like this. A Constitution is a living organism. It has to grow with the society that it governs, or else it will become brittle and snap. Now, if you believe that, you must believe your stockbroker when he tells you that the market is resting for an assault on the 10,000 level. The market panting at some base camp ready to, the stock market, for Pete's sake, is not a mountain climber. And a Constitution is not a living organism. It's a legal document. And it says some things, which it means, and it doesn't say other things, which it doesn't mean. And if you think that the proponents of the living Constitution are trying to bring you growth and flexibility, think again. The proponents of a living Constitution are trying to bring you what a Constitution always brings, not growth, not change, but inflexibility, permanence. My Constitution is a very flexible Constitution. You want the right to an abortion? To tell you the truth, the Constitution doesn't say a blessed thing about it. It neither forbids the state from prohibiting it, nor does it require the states to prohibit it. It says nothing about it. Therefore, if you want the right to an abortion, create it the way most rights are created in a democracy. Persuade your fellow citizens it's a good idea and pass a law. And if you feel the other way, persuade your fellow citizens the other way and prohibit abortion. That's flexibility. And you can change your mind. You can, for example, decide that even though the death penalty isn't unconstitutional, it's a bad idea. So persuade your fellow citizens to abolish it. And then later, when crime goes up, you say, that was a bad idea, and you can change your mind and go back and reinstitute it. Not with a living Constitution. Had we abolished the death penalty as we came close to doing, I sat with 3 colleagues who thought the death penalty was unconstitutional. It's mentioned in the Constitution No person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. What do you think they're talking about? And it says that in all capital cases, the accused shall be entitled to indictment by a grand jury. Nonetheless, 3 colleagues thought it's unconstitutional now. Didn't used to be, but now it is. Had the court abolished it, that would be the end of the matter. It would be no use discussing whether there should or should not be a death penalty. Can't have it. Just like abortion. Driven off the democratic stage. It is no use debating that subject anymore. It has been prohibited to the democratic society by the Supreme Court's finding that the American people have eliminated it from democratic debate. So for whatever reason you like the living Constitution, maybe you like what the court has done under the living Constitution, well, that's fine, but don't pretend that you like it because it brings flexibility. It brings rigidity, which is the whole reason people come to my court, instead of having to go state by state to get a right to abortion adopted, for example. All it takes is one decision from my court. And it's prohibited coast to coast now and forever. Or until, I suppose, the people adopt a constitutional amendment, which is very difficult. Or I guess until the Supreme Court changes its mind, which is sort of funny. Some people also think that the fight between originalism and the living Constitution is basically a fight between conservatives and liberals. Not at all. It has nothing to do whatever with whether you're a social conservative or a social liberal. And the best example of that are 2 cases that we decided on the same day. Must be 10 years ago now. The first case was a case called Romer versus Colorado. The people of Colorado had adopted by plebiscite an amendment to the state constitution which said that neither the state nor any political subdivision of the state would add to the list of protected statuses against which private individuals could not discriminate. You know, the usual ones are race, religion, sex, age, disability. Would not add to that sexual preference. Well, you know, some people thought that, there's really stupid idea. And if it's stupid, it must be unconstitutional. So they brought a lawsuit. And it came up to my court, and my court said, yes, it's unconstitutional. In violation of, I have no idea, the sexual preference clause of the Bill of Rights, you know? And the liberals loved it. They applauded it, and the conservatives rent their garments and gnashed their teeth. The very next case we announced, the same morning, was a case called BMW versus Gore. It's not the Nobel laureate. It was a different. It was a different Gore. It was Mr. Gore had bought himself a Beamer, which is advertised as having this marvelous finish that's baked 8 times deep in hidden valleys of the Alps by gnomes. And Mr. Gore's Beamer had gotten scratched on the way across the Atlantic. They did not send it back to the gnomes. They took a can of spray paint and he found out about this and he was really ticked. He brought a lawsuit. He got his compensatory damages, a couple of $100, and $2 million in punitive damages, which is ridiculous. So it must be unconstitutional. And BMW appealed it all the way to my court, and my court said, yes, it's unconstitutional. In violation of, I have no idea, the excessive damages clause of the Bill of Rights, you know, and if excessive punitive damages are unconstitutional, I assume excessive compensatory damages must be unconstitutional. Anyway, that one, the conservatives like. Conservatives don't like punitive damages, and the liberals rent their garments and gnash their teeth. I dissented in both cases, and I say a pox on both their houses. It hasn't. It has nothing to do with whether you're conservative or liberal. It has to do with what you think the Constitution is. It cuts in both directions. Mac mentioned the flag burning case, where I was the fifth vote to say the law prohibiting burning your own flag is unconstitutional, because that's how I understand the First Amendment. Now, at least where the law in question is directed at your expression. You know, if the law in the Johnson case were a municipal ordinance, which exists in almost every city. You remember when we were kids, you used to smell leaves burning in the street? It was such a lovely smell. Can't do it anymore, right? Every city has ordinances. You can't burn leaves, you can't burn rags, and you can't burn flags, okay? Now, if Johnson had been convicted of violating that ordinance, I would have been delighted to send his sandal-wearing, bearded carcass off to jail. For burning the flag, because basically I don't like people who burn the flag. But that wasn't the law in question. The law in question was not directed at burning. It was directed at expressions of contempt for the flag. And as I understand the First Amendment, you're entitled to express contempt for the government, even for the Supreme Court, and for the flag. And so, you know, I voted that way, and what Max said about the lovely Maureen is absolutely correct. And of course, you know, I don't need that. And that is one reason it is so hard to recall the courts back to originalism. Because you understand, the non-originalist judge, the evolutionist judge, is a happy fella. He comes home from court, and his wife says, "Oh dear, did you have a nice day at court?" And he said, "Oh yes, you know, today we had a constitutional case, and you know what? The Constitution meant exactly what I thought it ought to mean." No kidding, because that's your only criterion. Whereas if you're an originalist, sometimes it means stuff you don't really like. But there it is. So it's a hard sell calling people back to what it used to be. Well, I've been speaking about some of the false advantages of the living Constitution. Let me mention the obvious disadvantages. You know, the first thing you should ask about any theory of law or of anything else, legitimacy. Is it legitimate? Nothing in the Constitution says that the Supreme Court is to be the last word on the meaning of our Constitution. New European constitutions that create European constitutional courts, they do say that. They say the Constitutional Court shall be the authoritative interpreter. Our Constitution doesn't say that. We end up doing that because John Marshall says, look, it's lawyers' work. It's judges' work. Judges all the time encounter situations in which two statutes are difficult to reconcile. You do your best to reconcile them. If you can't reconcile them, the later statute prevails. It has implicitly repealed the earlier one. But, says Marshall, where there's a conflict between a statute and a super statute, which is the Constitution, it's the Constitution that must prevail. And this is standard judges' work. Judges have to do this all the time. Now, if you don't think it's lawyers' work, and hence judges' work, if you really believe that the Constitution is some empty bottle into which each generation is supposed to pour that liquid that it best loves, if that's what you think it is, then Marbury versus Madison is wrong. It shouldn't be up to the Supreme Court to decide what the Constitution means. We should have a Constitution like Great Britain, where it's the Parliament that decides. Do you think that I know or that my colleagues know, to quote that expression from the Eighth Amendment that I mentioned, do you think we know what are the evolving standards of decency out there? I'm afraid to ask what they are. I have no idea. I work inside the Beltway, live inside the Beltway, work in this marble palace. I don't know what's going on out there. I'll tell you who knows. The House of Representatives know. They have their thumb on the pulse of America. They know what the evolving standards are. So if that's what you think the Constitution is, then leave it up to the Congress and get the court out of the business. That's legitimacy. Only if it's lawyers' work should it be our business. And if it's lawyers' work, it means you approach the Constitution like any statute. And we don't think that statutes morph according to whatever we think is a good idea this year. I will give you the killer argument, the killer argument against the living Constitution. I give a lot of lectures at law schools, and just to make trouble. And I encourage the law students to ask their professor. Professor, you don't like Scalia, you don't like original. That's fine. That means you are a non-originalist. But non-originalism is not a theory of constitutional interpretation. It just means you don't agree with Scalia. What is your theory, Professor? Scalia knows what he's looking for. He has a criterion. What did the text mean? What was it understood to mean when the American people ratified it? Did cruel and unusual punishment mean you couldn't have the death penalty? Answer to that is easy. Now, if you're not going to use Scalia's criterion, what, Professor, is your criterion? You see, when Scalia finds that it's this way or that, you got him. He's handcuffed. He can't do the nasty, mean, conservative things he'd like to do to the country. Now, if you're not going to control your judges that way, how are you going to control them? What do you want them to look for? Think about it. There is really no other criteria you can possibly use. And just as in politics you can't beat somebody with nobody, so also in theories of constitutional interpretation you can't beat originalism with nothing. What else could you possibly use as a criterion? What could you tell your judges to look for? What? Natural law? Oh, we all agree on that, don't we? The philosophy of John Rawls? Some people, actually say that. Oh, save us. The more you think about it, the more you realize it's either originalism or else you essentially tell your judges, oh, wise judges, you went to, my goodness, to Stanford Law School and Harvard Law and even Yale Law School. Govern us. You must know the answers to these profound philosophical questions as to whether there should be a right to abortion, whether there should be a right to suicide, whether there should be a right to homosexual conduct. After all, you went to Harvard and Yale and Stanford. But that's ridiculous. There's nothing I learned in law school that qualifies me to decide those questions any more than Joe Sixpack. He knows as much about all of that as I do. It's preeminently a question for legislators and not for judges. But if you don't use the original meaning, that's essentially what you're telling your justices. Govern us. You decide in your wisdom whether there should be this right, that right, and the other right. And at the end of the road, I've been predicting this for 20 years. You've seen contentiousness in the appointment of justices and even now Court of Appeals judges. No kidding. It was inevitable. The American people aren't stupid. It took them a while to figure out from the Warren Court on what was happening. They have finally figured out the name of the game, that the court is essentially rewriting the Constitution from decade to decade, according to whatever the justices think is a good idea. And once the people figure that out, they're not going to use the criterions that they used to use to select justices. I mean, it used to be, is this person a good lawyer? Read a case, understand its background, understand how to interpret a text, have a modicum of judicial temperament. Well, that's pretty good. I mean, other things being equal, it's nice to have it. But that's not the important thing anymore. The important thing, what you should be looking for, is whether this nominee is going to write the new Constitution that you want. And that's what all this is about. That's what all of the confirmation struggles are about. Judge so-and-so, do you think there's a right to X in the Constitution? You don't. Well, I think it's there, and my constituent think it, and I'm certainly not going to vote for you if you don't think that right is in the... That's what's going on. It's a mini constitutional convention every time we nominate a new justice. It's crazy. But it's inevitable. And frankly, much as I dislike it, I prefer it to the alternative. It shouldn't be that the people decide what the Constitution means unless they do it by the very difficult process that constitutes an amendment to the Constitution. I mean, after all, who do you think the Bill of Rights is meant to protect you from? The people. It's my most important function. I have to tell the people to take a walk. Yeah, you'd like to do this, but you can't because the Bill of Rights protects this individual from you, the majority. You destroy all of that if you create a system in which the majority decides what the Constitution means. But as I say, I'd rather have that than having 5 out of 9 lawyers decide it, which is where we are now. Well, I hope you will think about it's not a subject for lawyers. I talk about this to any group of intelligent citizens. It's a major problem of our times. What do we think we're doing when we interpret the Constitution? And do we want to keep putting people on the bench who think it's a free-fall game? Whatever I think ought to be there is there. Thank you very much for this award. It's a very handsome medal, and I'm honored to have received it and to have been here at the Helms Center. Tomorrow, I hope to visit Senator Helms.
As a parting gift for you tonight, please take a complimentary copy of Senator Helms' book, Empire for Liberty, as you exit this evening. Thank you for coming. Good night.